Autologous CAR T cell therapies represent a bright spot, perhaps the brightest spot on an ATMP landscape that's all at once brimming with promise and beleaguered by clinical letdowns. Dr. Kristin Yarema, newly appointed CEO at clinical stage CAR T developer Poseida Therapeutics, knows this very well. And yet, she and Poseida are all in, not on autologous CAR Ts, but are instead developing a pipeline of healthy donor-derived CAR T therapeutics, the allogeneic approach. The company's underlying intention is to change the cell therapy accessibility paradigm by leveraging the manufacturing and economic scale benefits of a one-to-many off-the-shelf approach. Poseida's candidates are many and its support strong. It's got clinical programs in multiple myeloma and B-cell malignancies in partnership with Roche. And it just recently freshened up a deal with Astellas to support its solid tumor programs. I'm Matt Pillar. This is the Business of Biotech, and longtime listeners might recall that Poseida founder and then CEO Eric Ostertag joined me on the podcast a few years back. Well, today I'm excited to catch up on the company with Dr. Yarema, who was president of the cell therapy practice there for less than a year before taking on the CEO role in January of this year. Dr. Yarema, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Matt. I am just thrilled to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you here, and I always kind of follow an arc in my interviews, and no matter how uncomfortable it makes my biotech exec guests feel, I like to get a little bit of background on you and why you're doing what you're doing. And perusing your LinkedIn profile, it's not hard to kind of follow a little bit of a trajectory there. After earning your Ph.D. in chemical and biomolecular engineering, doing a Max Planck fellowship, you joined McKinsey, which is not super uncommon among the biotech execs that I've interviewed. It's sort of a springboard into multiple things, but I want to kind of get your perspective in your own words without making assumptions on sort of what you were thinking about doing when you joined McKinsey and what sort of a career you were looking to form up at the time, whether it was sort of orchestrated or you were just kind of feeling out the waters. What was kind of going on then?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the time that I was finishing all of my scientific work, I think I would say I had come to the conclusion that I was industry ready. I love the science. I always loved everything that I was doing, and I carry that passion with me even today. But I had come to the conclusion that I was probably less wired to go and be the world expert in a narrow scientific field. Although I could have gone that path, and that was probably the dream I had since I was 10 years old. But I realized that I would be happier and probably more productive by spreading my energies and my efforts across a wide range of areas. And I really wanted to have more immediate impact. I was always very much about impact. That's why I chose engineering over a pure scientific training, actually, right? I always wanted to be working on things that were very applied. I wanted to see, the fruits of the project in quite real time. And so I started to think, okay, I'm probably not a lifetime academic here. I need to get into industry, specifically medicine. And I had some medical members of my family, practitioners, nobody really in biopharma research. And so I thought, okay, that's my next step. And I could have gone to be an industry scientist. That was a very viable path. But at that time, McKinsey and some of the other consultancies were recruiting new PhDs and PhD students very heavily because they had come to the conclusion that they often made excellent management consultants. And it had to do with how they approached their work. So their approach to their work was really, as I saw it, applying the scientific method, but to business problems. So you get a problem, you formulate a hypothesis, you go and investigate, you come to some conclusions, you present them. And I thought to myself, hey, that's great. I can do that. I can formulate hypotheses about anything and go and investigate them. And so I'll see where that leads me. I'll get an overview of the biotech and biopharma industry. I was very clear with McKinsey that I really wanted to focus in healthcare, and they gave me the opportunity to do that. And see if this was the industry for me, get closer to the front end of the healthcare system and start working on, medicines that were either already on the market or things that would be near the clinic. And, it was really a fantastic opportunity to do that. Consultants are so expensive that whatever they're working on, the project that they're hired for, it's always of great importance to the company, because otherwise, why would you splash out, expensive consulting dollars for that? So, early in your career, it's a fantastic way to see many, many different companies and many different products and areas. So I worked for 19 of the top 20 pharma companies at that time, a whole lot of biotechs. I did growth strategy, R&D strategy, quite a bit of org work, product turnaround, like just about every conceivable sort of project. And so, I left with, I think, a really good understanding of the landscape of the biopharma industry. And, that led me to the conclusion that this is where I want it to be.
Yeah, that's really cool. The intent of this podcast from the outset and it remains is to inspire and educate your peer biotech execs. I mean, there's a great community of biotech execs, upstart biotech execs, and this podcast was sort of created to create a forum for them and a source of information. But one of the more interesting and rewarding elements of this pod, I mean, we're 200 and I think this will be like 212 some episodes in. One of the more rewarding aspects is the feedback that I get and the questions that I get from people who are still in academia and are considering pursuing a career in big pharma or biotech or biopharma. And a question that I'm often asked is like, what do I do once I have my PhD? Like, the people that you've interviewed, they've come at it from all different angles. What's the most efficient path? And it sounds to me like this consulting opportunity was an efficient path for you, because the other aspect of that is like a lot of the students who come out, even seasoned execs who come out of academia, for instance, or practicing physicians, when they decide that they're going to go into industry, they struggle mightily with the transition to business. Yeah. Would you agree with that? And would you suggest perhaps like the consultancy route is a pretty...
I would, yeah. For me, it was fantastic. So what I would say is you will work very hard, but you will see a lot. You will see many, many different, projects, many different companies. And I think the pattern recognition is really very powerful because it helps you become very calibrated, right? You learn, this challenge has been faced by many other companies many times before. It's always going to feel unique and very present to that current situation or that current team. But you will say, yeah, I've seen this 10 times before. And by the way, every other company is facing exactly the same questions and challenges. Here's some ideas that I picked up that might be relevant, or here's why your situation is a little bit unique, relative to others. So I think it's, there's a lot of travel and there's a lot of hard work involved, but it's really an excellent training ground. And I think the other piece that for me was very important was, working in consulting, which is a team-based approach, and it's client service, right? Which can be challenging. You have a customer, you have a client, company. It really taught me a lot about how to work effectively in teams, how to be a leader of teams and organizations, and how to bring people together cross-functionally to solve very, very complicated problems. So, as a student or a researcher, I was very good at solving problems myself, that I had defined. Mm-hmm. But I did not receive training how to solve very complicated problems that required inputs from lots of different people or places, and how to move things that require efforts from many people forward effectively. I don't think academia is a great training ground for that, but you do it all the time, when you're, parachuted in as a consultant, or because a lot of the projects you have to go around and work with many, many different areas of the company. So, now I see, tremendous power, and where I am today, I think much less about my job as, I need to solve X. That is not my job. My job is, the path for the company forward needs to be charted, or we need to solve XYZ problems as a company. And what I need to do is ensure that that happens somehow, involving or bringing together whatever people or resources or outside experts or whatever is needed to do the task. So I think that experience in particular is very different, or can be very different, in industry versus in academia. And you mentioned that people sometimes struggle with transition. What I've seen is it can often be about that. It's not about the science. It's not about the medicine. It's about, how do I fit into a corporate environment and get things done?
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that I hear quite frequently is the struggle with the language, right? Like, it's a whole different vocabulary.
Yes.
And you learn that vocabulary, I'm sure, pretty quickly working at McKinsey. Speaking of vocabulary, digging even further back into your academic days, I've got a question for you about the duality of Dr. Kristin Yarema. Before you earned your PhD, you doubled up your undergrad efforts at Stanford in biochemical and biomolecular engineering. You also earned a BA in English literature, both with honors, I might add. It begs the question, like, what's behind that? Like, were you like, was it a conscious effort to balance out your left and right brain equilibrium? Like, what's the story there?
Matt, I got to hand it to you. You have really done your homework on me. But but I suppose the answer is yes. In fact, it's why I elected to go to Stanford in the first place. I was looking for a school that was very strong as an undergraduate, very strong in the technical disciplines, and very strong in the arts and humanities. And that, that is really a duality or a tension that I felt all my life. So, growing up, I was very much pulled to, science and math and technology, but also very much pulled to the arts and humanities, literature, music. So, it was so as an undergraduate, I elected not to choose. My choice was decided not to decide, and pursued both of those. I ultimately concluded that I was likely to have more impact on, I don't know, the world at large, I suppose, by heading down the technical path and going into biopharma. And I've been very happy with that choice. I actually get more opportunity to exercise my creative juices than I would have expected in the industry. We have, lots of visual and verbal communication, to be sure. But I also think that bringing creativity to looking at drug development and commercialization, is really important. These molecules are cells. They do not come with instructions. And clinical development in particular, I think, is very strategic and often coming up with ideas that are not cookie cutter, not what everybody else did, as where you're going to build in your product differentiation, or where you're going to, take something that could have been an okay therapy and really make it, a remarkable one, which I've, been honored to have the opportunity to do, a few times in my career.
Yeah.
But I would also say, to anybody out there today who may be, feeling a similar, duality and similar tension, that I would not say that one could not have impact as, as an artist or someone in the humanities today. The older I get, the more I think, we really should be valuing as a society our artists just as much as our builders. So
yeah. Well said. Well said. And I mean, you are a great communicator. That's quite obvious. So that English lit effort serves you well, and hopefully you still find time to read and enjoy, maybe even write a little bit.
absolutely.
You're welcome to write for Bioprocess Online anytime you'd like.
I may take you up on that.
Yeah. After McKinsey, you moved on to Big Bio, Novartis, and Amgen. So I'm curious about that. Like, what sort of precipitated the transition to Big Bio in particular?
Yeah. Well, I had always thought that I would, move to industry at the right time. I actually stayed in consulting longer than I anticipated just because I enjoyed it so much. For me, the right time ultimately became when I got married to another consultant, by the way. And, it was like, okay, it's time to stop running around the globe, stop traveling, have something that keeps me in one place a little bit more. And so, that led me to taking the first role at Novartis and later Amgen, as you said. So it was always a planned transition, I guess. Why big bio and not biotech to start with? Well, I had more familiarity with the big company setting because more of the clients as a consultant were big companies because they can afford it. And I felt I knew how to navigate that setting pretty well. Really liked what Novartis was doing at the time, and I got a absolutely great first role. I came in and I was really overseeing all of the commercial inputs and product strategy for a huge chunk of Novartis's pipeline. It was everything outside of oncology, which was a little ironic because in McKinsey, I was kind of known as the oncology person, and my PhD was kind of in oncology. But you kind of go where you're needed, and so that was an opportunity to learn everything else. And I would say that's, I think that's a good first move because large companies have lots of experience, they have lots of resources, and I don't just mean financial resources, but I mean other people, knowledgeable people. So you can really continue to learn a lot. And it's different being inside a company than as a consultant. Consultant, you also learn a lot, but it's different being a part of the machinery versus just, helping tinker with it from the outside, I suppose.
Yeah. Did your husband follow suit eventually and join industry?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, there was a time when we kept, going around to different companies together. We were at 3 companies in a row together, obviously not in the same job, but, it was a very interesting 2-body problem. When we left, large biopharma eventually and moved to biotechs, now we don't cross paths really anymore, but it was interesting. It was fun. I think it's good to have someone who understands the frame of reference that you're working with every day. You just have to make sure you're not talking about, work too much off the clock.
All the time. Yeah. Yeah. It's a novel frame of reference for sure. What was the, I guess, modus operandi when you did leave big bio and move into biotech? That was with Atara?
Yes. With Atara. Exactly. So, back when I was still doing research, when I was a researcher, some of the areas that I was working on were things that just at that time were not ready for prime time. So it was the very early days of working with cells. We were doing hollow fiber bioreactors. Synthetic biology was kind of really just emerging. None of this stuff was really ready for prime time. Like the very first tyrosine kinase inhibitors, which are now, bog standard in many, cancers as treatment, were just being discovered. So I had always been really energized by these advanced modalities and advanced therapies, but we just weren't there yet back in those days. But I had kept my eye on the space and always thought that cell therapy was particularly exciting. And so when I got the call, which came in through my network, not through a recruiter, got the call from Pascal Touchon, the CEO of Atara Biotherapeutics. I thought, okay, I wasn't looking at the time, but I was like, this is the one. This is the opportunity to finally make the move for, because it was something that I was really passionate about. I looked at the technology. I had seen so many drugs, scores, hundreds of drugs, feel very calibrated on separating the wheat from the chaff at this stage. And I said, okay, I think what they're doing is really important and is likely to work. And I liked the people. It's another piece of guidance that I would give to people considering that transition. A large, biopharma there are many, if you don't like the situation you are in, you can always go to another therapeutic area, or maybe you can, if you're a commercial person, you can go to a different country even. In a small company, the people are the people, those are the people. You had better like them. You are going to spend a lot of time with them. So make your choice very carefully, not just based on the technology, which is table stakes, and you better like that too, but also really on the cultural fit. And if you think you're going to be excited to work with these people. So all of that fit for me. I joined Atara, as you said, a couple of weeks before the pandemic started, literally, which was, very interesting onboarding experience, in and of itself. And I joined as Chief Commercial Officer. I also had corporate communications as part of that. And Atara's an amazing company. It was really, words cannot describe what it was like to be part of the team and the organization that got the world's first ever allogeneic T-cell immunotherapy through approval. It's a product called Ebvallo, for a rare type of lymphoma that transplant patients can sometimes get. And it is terrible. Patients who fail their first therapy for PTLD have a median life expectancy of something like 3 weeks. So it's very serious, very acute, and you really need a powerful and immediately available therapy to do that. So Ebvallo is an allogeneic T-cell immunotherapy that is now available for these patients in Europe and hopefully soon in the US as well.
How did that win feel different than, I mean, in your years at Novartis and Amgen, you played a role in a lot of wins, for sure. How did the win at Atara feel different and perhaps influence what you did next, like what you chose to, where you chose to take your career after that, if at all?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it absolutely did. So I would say drug development in general is hard, right? People need to know this is a hard business. It is high risk. It's a very long cycle time. It's difficult. Even more difficult is to try to do something that is entirely new, right? Develop a therapy that is an entirely new modality. It's got all kinds of risks. Lots of discussions with health authorities. What's the regulatory path? How do we gauge quality manufacturing for this thing?
How do we fund this thing that no one's ever seen? How do we fund this thing?
Exactly. All of this, right? It's so I think different and particularly exciting and meaningful is, this company, this team were the first to really make this happen. And it was not easy. It was incredibly challenging. There were many, hurdles and challenges along the way. But, it eventually got there. And I'm confident that today there are people alive, enjoying their lives and with their families who otherwise they would not be so, were it not for those efforts. So, I think that's particularly meaningful. That's something that I'll always take with me. And how did that impact me in terms of, preparing me for eventually coming to Poseida? Well, in a few ways. I think I would say first, it gave me absolute conviction that the future of cell therapy must be allogeneic. I just gave you a great example. There are patients out there in a number of diseases who cannot wait for bespoke autologous cell therapies to be manufactured, which can take weeks to months if the capacity is even available, to manufacture that therapy for them. And that's just not acceptable. Cell therapy is so powerful. We need to, offer every patient who deserves to have the benefit of cell therapy to have that opportunity to do so. And for that, we need allogeneic cell therapy that uses great starting material, healthy donor cells as starting material, can be manufactured at scale at much lower cost, and can be, either stored at hospitals or shipped overnight to be ready right when that physician and patient together make the decision that cell therapy is the right next step. So it gave me that absolute conviction. And it also put me in the position of really coming to understand, let's say, the state of play of cell therapy. There are so many cell therapy companies out there, and it can be difficult to really understand how they're different, right? Everybody is making big claims. We're very different from everybody else, but it can be quite challenging, even for people in the field, to understand exactly how. So since I was in the space, it really gave me the opportunity to go deep and, and learn about all of the companies in the space. And I saw data from Poseida at an ASCO GU conference, genitourinary conference, for a prostate cancer program that Poseida had. And this is a solid tumor. CAR-Ts have really struggled in solid tumors. And I saw that data. The poster didn't get very much attention at the time, but I saw it and said, I think that's really remarkable data in solid tumors for CAR-T. I'm going to take more of a look under the hood, which I did. And, really learning more about Poseida's technology, I came to the conclusion that Poseida really has the winning set of proprietary, totally different genetic engineering tools and supporting technologies. And so really has all the elements that are necessary to make allogeneic cell therapy happen. And so that started the process by which I ultimately joined Poseida.
Yeah. And when you joined, that was 22, right? Correct? In 22?
It was April of last year. So April of 2023.
Of 23. Okay. Yeah. And you joined as president of the cell therapy division?
Yes, I did. Yes.
Yeah. What sort of differentiated that role from the role that you're in now?
Yes. Great question. So Poseida at its core is actually a platform technology company. So you mentioned, Eric Ostertag. So Eric was the first gene therapy student out of the University of Pennsylvania, very first one.
Mm-hmm.
And way back then, he quickly came to the conclusion that the kind of tools that were available, a lot of which relied on viral vector technology, just would never be able to deliver the profiles of the kinds of medicines that we would ultimately need. So a lot of limitations of viral technology. So there's a lot of safety concerns, expensive and difficult to manufacture, but also the versatility is limited. You can only pack so much DNA in a virus. And so it's very difficult to put a lot of functionality into your medicine. So he developed an entirely different set of tools and completely unique approaches to do this. So we use those tools today on two sides of the business. So we use them in an ex vivo or outside the body way to engineer cells, and that is our allogeneic CAR-T. But we can also use them in vivo as genetic medicines. And so we have a program in gene editing, for example, a program in non-viral gene insertion. So I came in to start leading just the cell therapy, the allogeneic cell therapy division, as you said, but Poseida actually has much more, many more programs and much more technology under its umbrella than just cell therapy, though those programs are in the lead.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, that sort of begs the question, given, so Poseida being a cell therapy company, a gene therapy company, and even within the cell therapy program, like the solid tumor programs, it's a pretty broad array of indications that you're looking at, right? I mean, solid tumors across multiple indications. How would you say your experiences, from McKinsey through Big Bio, sort of prepared you to, move from a cell therapy discipline, leadership of a very specific cell therapy discipline, to leadership of a company that is multifaceted, to say the least, in terms of its the targets and indications it's going after?
Yeah. Well, so I would say I am really grateful for all the preparation and all the training that I had, starting with consulting, being at Novartis and Amgen, because I really did have the opportunity to do just about everything. So I was in many commercial roles, global, in-country, pipeline, in-market, lifecycle management, but also time in clinical development, strategy, business development. I was originally trained as a biochemical engineer. So, what do? You culture cells. So, it's been, definitely something of a wandering career journey. I would be the first to admit that, but I'm very grateful to have had all the different experiences in different functions and seeing different things that I have, because I think that has really given me a great perspective on all the different areas, that need to happen, all the different capabilities a company needs to be successful. I mentioned corporate communications at Atara. That taught me about investor relations and managing the whole investor side. So all of these different experiences, and I wouldn't say that someone has to have all of them in order to take on a leadership role like CEO. But I will say I feel very well prepared, having seen, and played a role in so many different places. And I think that helps me be calibrated on, what's likely to be an issue that needs real attention, maybe needs my personal attention, versus other things that are just going to work themselves out, or it's just, kind of business as usual. Yeah, it's a challenge, but we're going to work through it. And that, I think, is a very important and valuable skill, because no one can be everywhere at once, right? You really need to pick your spots, and you need to pick your altitude. And again, I'm very thankful that I had, so much opportunity to see so many things and so many different therapies in development or on the market or whatever, because it really gives me comfort and confidence in knowing where to go in that way.
Yeah, yeah. When you took on the CEO role, what led to that? Like, what was the sequence of events? There was some transition there from Eric to was Mark Gergen.
Yes,
the
absolutely.
CEO
Yes.
in between the two of you. Then I always hesitate to ask these questions about CEO transitions, because sometimes there's uncomfortable stories behind those transitions. But what led you from president of the cell therapy practice to CEO of the whole company?
Yeah. Well, I think this was all very well planned. So one of the things I love about Poseida is very systematic. For a small company, we really try to be, rigorous and move quickly, but be, have some method and not just madness all the time. So, you're absolutely right. So Eric founded the company, really put in place what we have that's Poseida today. But then around the time of the first transition, which was moving the programs, from being a research stage company to starting to go into the clinic, that's where the transition to Mark Gergen came. And Mark, who still currently serves as our executive chairman, by the way, had an absolutely fantastic set of skills and experiences for the company at its next stage. He is a phenomenal deal maker and, just has a legendary resume within biotech. Amongst other things, he was one of the co-founders of Mirati. So he was really instrumental in, providing the foundation for Poseida in the form of some of these partnerships, capitalizing the company. So, putting together the Roche deal, helping to orchestrate the first deal with Astellas. I was just looking back actually earlier this week at the non-dilutive capital that the company has raised. We've only ever done one small equity raise since the time of the IPO. And over the last 3 years alone, we've secured $400 million in non-dilutive financing through these partnerships. And we've got, maybe up to another 150 million coming potentially just in the next 12 to 18 months alone. So Mark, really put all of that in place for Poseida, and then saw that the next transition point was coming, the next inflection point, which is for Poseida to be, really a full-fledged clinical stage company, which we are. We have 3 programs in the clinic. We have, several programs rapidly approaching the clinic in the CAR T, and then we have, the genetic medicines programs, and we've said we'll have at least 1 IND in 2025 on that side as well. So, for Poseida now in our next phase, this is where the rubber hits the road in execution of clinical development, strategy, delivering data, thinking about target product profiles, making sure we have the data to support them, all of that. And I think that's, where my experience and my skill set, and having seen an allogeneic T cell immunotherapy all the way across the finish line, those are some of the skills that we're looking for now.
Yeah, I mean, you've got some, as we've ascertained, some commercial chops. So I don't want to get too far ahead of our skis here, but I mean, I imagine putting Dr. Kristin Yarema in this position puts you in a nice position to stay there at least for some, I don't want to say long term. We don't want to look too far into the future, but for some amount of time, given your commercial chops.
I could not be happier at Poseida. This is right where I want to be. Poseida is the real deal. I truly believe we are probably the emerging leader in allogeneic cell therapy and genetic medicines. And it's the technology, and it is, like I said earlier, equally the people. The culture here is very, very special. People have a really unique ability to just make things happen. And I've seen a lot of companies. I feel very, very well calibrated on that. I tell our people that all the time. Like, you don't understand how special this place really is. It's this, look around you, look at your colleagues, be thankful for them.
Yeah, that's great. Give us a little update on how the pipeline has kind of come together in the time that you've been there and shortly before, an update on that. And then I want to talk a little bit more specifically about some of the partnership deals, because I mean, that's so important, not just from a product development standpoint, moving the ball down the field, but to your point, I mean, it's been a financial boon to Poseida as well, right? Keeping the lights on, keeping the employees getting their paychecks and doing the good work. So, let's start with the pipeline though.
Yeah.
Just give us an update on recent pipeline advance.
Absolutely. So the pipeline is going like gangbusters. I guess that's it in a nutshell. So, it really started, I would say, with ASH last December of 2023. So that was the first time that we really put up a data set for the program that is the most in the lead, which is the myeloma program, PBCMA Allo1. So this is one of the 2 programs, heme programs, that's partnered with Roche, the lead in that partnership. And it was an early data set, but what we showed was that an allogeneic CAR T really has the promise to be at least as good as an autologous CAR T. And I think right now that's something that most of the industry does not believe, right? There's been a lot of challenges in allogeneic CAR T, a lot of, there's a lot of hype and some setbacks. We believe that you need a particular kind of allogeneic T cell to be the foundation of your CAR T, the T stem cell memory cell. Not just any old T cell will do. It's got to be that. And to get that kind of CAR T, you can't use a viral technology. You really have to use a transposon technology, which is what we use. So this was the first data set for a program, with that profile. And what we showed is in a very, very heavily pretreated population, probably the sickest multiple myeloma population ever treated, we saw an overall response rate that was, incredibly competitive with the autologous CAR Ts. And we saw great depth of response. It was a very early data set, so we don't, we didn't really know about durability at that time, but we really liked the leading indicators of what we saw. We could see our cells. We measured them by flow cytometry. You could see them sticking around in the bone marrow where they're supposed to be, fighting the tumor. So we're incredibly encouraged. Our partner Roche also incredibly encouraged. And so that program has been continuing ever since. And what we've said is we'll give at least one data update, possibly multiple data updates on that program later this year, in the second half of this year. And it's been running now for, in the kind of doses and cohorts that are probably of most interest for over a year. So by the time we give a data update on this, it's going to be a very meaty one. And I think we are going to surprise the world with, hopefully a really, really interesting set of data that shows, an off-the-shelf allogeneic CAR T that patients do not have to wait for, that everybody can receive, and that can be manufactured at scale. We're getting 100 doses from a single patient, single batch right now, depending on what you believe about the cell dose. This is not a dream. This is, this is coming. So that's, really put wind in our sails, as you can imagine. But it's not the only program that we have in the clinic. So we also have a second heme program. This is a dual CAR T. So sometimes we call it dual CAR T. It's really a tandem. It just has domains on one CAR that bind both proteins. This is not that. We have two full-length CARs in our cell, one against CD19 and one against CD20. And those are both great targets for B-cell malignancies like non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So this is a program that we think would be able to be used in patients who've failed one of the commercial CD19 CAR Ts, because a lot of times that's due to antigen escape. They lose the CD19. Obviously, your CAR T doesn't work anymore, but they'll have CD20. Or you could even use it before, and it's kind of an insurance policy if the patient's tumor evolves and they do lose, the CD19 over time. So that program is enrolling. We'll give a data update. We haven't released any data on that program yet, but we'll give a data update on that one this year as well. And then, as you mentioned, we have our solid tumor program. This is against mucin 1C, which is a target expressed only on cancer cells in a range of epithelial cell malignancies. So that program, we continue to enroll. We'll give a data update there also. And most recently on that program, we had a poster at AACR where we showed in solid tumors, we've always known that solid tumors are a more difficult nut to crack with CAR T than heme malignancies. We think maybe one of the reasons why is it's more difficult to get an adequate conditioning, what we call lymphodepletion of those patients, which is what you need. You kind of need to clear out some of the immune system cells to make space or niche for the CAR T cells to expand, differentiate, become the tumor killing cells that you're looking for. And so what we showed is if you go to a higher level of lymphodepletion, we can get much better expansion of the cells. So we're very excited with this new learning about, what we will be seeing in that program. And again, we'll give a data update there. So all of that is just on the cell therapy side. At ASGCT, we show that our lead gene editing program, which is for hereditary angioedema, that our gene editor is probably 20 to 40 times higher fidelity than Cas-Clover, which is what everybody's excited about already. So, really promising technology there. And we also have a non-viral program, fully non-viral program, that's a gene therapy for factor VIII, for hemophilia A. That's an area that's, had some challenges with gene therapy in the past, but we think those are because those were viral gene therapy programs, not non-viral gene therapy programs. And a problem that those programs have had is you don't get durable expression of the factor VIII protein, which is what you're looking for when you're treating hemophilia. Well, we showed, and this was in rodents, but we'll be moving to primates, non-human primates, we showed rock steady expression of the factor VIII protein at therapeutic levels all the way through 13 months. This really surprised, all of the practitioners and thought leaders who were there. So we feel like the pipeline is just, it's like an embarrassment of riches. Everything is moving forward as we would hope. If we had more capital, we could fund more things, but we're focused on those things in the pipeline right now.
Yeah. And the embarrassment of riches has obviously attracted the attention of companies like Roche and Astellas. That being said, you don't just put out some good news and have all comers, knocking down your door. So I'm hoping we can dig in a little bit into more, probably specifically the Astellas, the refresh of the Astellas deal that you've probably played more of a hand in. The Roche deal was kind of pre your time. So, and sort of how it came together. So I guess I'd just start there. Like first, what is the collaboration entail? Like, what does the collaboration look like? And then maybe follow that up with how it came to pass.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the second deal that we did with Astellas. So there was a first deal which was a little more arm's length. So it was essentially a strategic investment on the part of Astellas into Poseida. So they got some equity, they got a board observer seat, some limited rights of negotiation on a program that were time bound. So it wasn't like a real collaboration. It's still very meaningful, and we appreciated starting that relationship, but we weren't working together. But this spring we announced, in a way that Astellas is doubling down on Poseida, if you will, by announcing a real collaboration and license agreement. And we are really excited about this because I think it's an example of where, it's not just a license of something from one company to another. This is really bringing together technology from two companies that's incredibly complementary and creates the potential for new medicines that neither company would have been able to deliver on alone. So specifically, this is regarding a convertible CAR T. Well, what the heck is that? I like to think of it as, there's the screwdrivers with the exchangeable tips. So if you think about the handle of the screwdriver, that's like the CAR carrying cell itself. When you've got a CAR T, that's the long part of the screwdrivers, sticking up with some binder on the end. And then the convertible tips are, what you swap in. So Astellas has a technology through their subsidiary Xiphos that they call MicAbodies that are these interchangeable tips. So what the arrangement is Poseida will produce that chassis car, that handle of the screwdriver. And then Poseida Astellas rather, will provide up to 2 of those interchangeable tips. And what's really cool about this technology is, you can, it has manufacturing advantages, right? Maybe you manufacture the cell once and then you're just essentially manufacturing an antibody component. So that probably has some cost advantages, maybe some regulatory advantages. But it also opens up the possibility to go after different targets or maybe even to change targets in real time. So you could, in theory, by mass action in a patient, give them the CAR T cell, give them an initial MicAbody, then maybe infuse a different MicAbody later, knock off the first one, and then you've kind of changed the target. Or you could give a mix of MicAbodies, and then maybe you have a multifunctional cell with CAR Ts that are, directed at different targets. So this is not an approach that Poseida was, planning to pursue. We weren't looking at a convertible CAR technology. And for their part, Astellas, didn't have, I think they thought, the right type of cell. Remember, I mentioned not just any CAR T will do, you really want the T stem cell memory cell. So if so we're providing the allogeneic T stem cell memory CAR T, and they're providing their convertible CAR tips, these MicAbodies. And so this is in solid tumors, and opening up space that neither company would have been able to pursue independently. So it's really, I think, a great example of a win-win.
Yeah. You mentioned that that it doubled down on the relationship, and I'm curious, and you're actually working together now. Like, I'm curious about what that looks like in practice. Like, what is, because these partnerships take on just so many different permutations and form factors. What does working with them look like? I mean, are your people like in constant contact? Are they, sleeves rolled up in the lab with their people? What does it kind of look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what's great about the two companies is I think they share, really a high science, set of values and culture, along with a passion for patients. I would say the same is true, of our partners at Roche too. And that's very important because, it means that the scientists get very excited to talk to each other, to work together. So, even in the run up to this, there was a lot of excitement. And when we finally signed it and started to get going, like from day one, the scientists are talking together, they're meeting, they're charting out the plans, um, working on selecting the targets. So it really is a very hands-on, very fluid communication, sort of a setup. And I think that's really important if you want to maximize speed. If you're kind of shuttling communications back and forth, which is another model, you can do that, but you're going to lose a lot of time. So
Yeah.
I think it was really easy to get into that mode of working very well together and constant communication because we already had that previous relationship. So, like I said, it wasn't an active collaboration, but we did talk to them all the time. We had standing meetings, regularly once a month. So there was already a lot of, I would say, understanding of the companies mutually, a lot of trust, a lot of respect. And so that just, really kickstarted, I would say, our ability to work immediately out of the gate once we entered this new phase.
What advice would you give to biotechs that perhaps don't have high profile or any, for that matter, partnerships with companies like Roche and Astellas, but who are I mean, who's not interested in that, right? But
Yeah.
is it, I mean, do these things kind of, is the seed planted at events like ASGCT and AACR? Is it,
Oh,
or,
yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely. No, I think that's where these kinds of conferences are incredibly important because everybody is there. So, you will have, I mean, you'll have a lot, the physicians who are attending the conferences for sure, but you'll also have all the industry people there. So you will have the scientific and medical experts, from companies that might be candidates for partnering. You will also have all of their business development people and their diligence teams. And it's a different experience than just, finding their data later on, because, people have the ability to go up to the poster and ask questions, of the people presenting right there. Or, if it's an oral presentation, right after that oral presentation, they're there asking questions, engaging in dialogue. And sometimes very unexpected things come out of it. I mean, ASGCT was probably the most recent experience for us, which was a lot of our genetic medicines work that we hadn't really shared before, and people didn't really understand how far we had advanced with those tools. We were just mobbed. The poster session was supposed to be 2 hours long. We had different posters on different days. Every single one of them went 12 to 7. And a lot of it was, people from biopharma companies, large and small, all sizes, trying to understand what we were doing, and, many conversations sparking on from that afterwards. We don't know if there's a way to work together here, but, maybe there is. Maybe we're interested in your asset, or, we have this technology, you have that technology, maybe they're complementary. Let's pursue this. So there's certainly a path. It certainly is work. I don't want to say it's magically all comes together and poof. No, but I do think, to your point, these conferences and industry events are the perfect place to meet the right people and start that dialogue.
Yeah. couple more questions, and I'll respect your time. I know I'm starting to abuse it a little bit.
I'm all yours, Matt. All yours.
I appreciate that. What's your advice? Some advice around what not to do. Like, you get the perception, if you don't have something fantastic, is it worth going? Is it worth taking that time and presenting that poster? And that could be a completely wrong perception, because there's opportunity for everyone. But is there sort of do you have some thoughts around like what's not a good idea if you're looking to attract partnership and perhaps use that venue as a vehicle to it?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Staying home and hoping people will come to you is probably, not likely to be a winning strategy, because, the world is a very complicated place. People have to go digging for information. It's a lot easier now. We have, many ways of searching information that we didn't have before, but we also have a lot more information. It's a very crowded information, landscape. And so, hoping that, that potential partners are going to just discover what you're doing, not being proactive about it is, I mean, it might work, but you're certainly not putting the odds in your favor, I would say. So, I think interest in talking with people, genuine interest in learning, and it can be very open, right? Like, what are you looking for? If there's not a there, then great. You have to be prepared for that conversation. But sometimes you just don't know what people are really going to be interested in or what they're going to be motivated by. And they also don't know to seek you out. So I just had one conversation comes vividly to mind where, a potential partner company had been looking very much for a technology like ours, had actually made it a company mandate. And they had talked to many, many companies, but they actually hadn't talked to us because, they just assumed maybe our dance card was full, or, just hadn't come around to, to get to us. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until we reached out to them, say, I have no idea if you have interest in the kinds of projects that we're working on or not, that we heard, oh, actually, we're looking exactly, for this type of technology and opportunity. Gee, I didn't realize we hadn't talked to you before. So, I think maybe it sounds a little, I don't know, trite, like, just get yourself out there. But I think that is, a part of it. And I don't think you have to have earth-shattering data. You can also be a taker in of information, right? So maybe you go to the conference, you see what everybody else is doing, and maybe that sparks an idea. Maybe it's the missing piece for your technology that you didn't know was out there, right? Same thing happens to us. Oh, did you know this company has this that could be, really quite useful?
Yeah, that's very helpful. I appreciate that. What's next for you? I'm gonna wrap it up here, because like I said, I want to be respectful of your time. I feel like we could go on for another hour. But what's next? What's next for you? What's next for Poseida in terms of business development or clinical activity? What are you most excited about right now?
Well, it's going to be an absolutely jam-packed second half of the year for us. It's rare to be, for a company to, I think, to have so much data coming out, packed into a relatively short period of time. I mean, all 3 clinical programs, we're going to give data updates. So, we're very excited about that. We're going to have an R&D day as well on the cell therapy side. We had one for genetic medicines in the spring. So, you're really going to hear a lot from Poseida in the second half. So that's certainly a priority. We continue to, seek interesting partnerships. We've been very clear about that. It's been our MO for a long time. We would be so excited to do something in the area of genetic medicines. We have no partnerships active there, right now on any of the programs. That's an obvious area where, we would be thrilled to talk to people. So, I think those are some of the things that are ahead. in terms of what's exciting, and where's my focus, I am genuinely thrilled to come to work each day. I just really believe that Poseida, like I said before, is the real deal, and is a wonderful place to be. We say that our medicines have the capacity to cure. It's kind of one of our taglines, capacity to cure. And so I feel like my focus right now is really on execution and making sure that we prove that out, that we continue to move these programs ahead. We deliver the data that, shows the world that these medicines do indeed have the capacity to do that, and that they will be the kinds of medicines that, as I said, are going to be available to far more patients who could benefit from them than we've been able to make available the kinds of advanced therapies that we have today. So, that's where you're going to find me, right here, trying to make sure that happens.
Yeah, it's an important differentiator. I was thinking about what you said around being able to produce an allogeneic therapy that's at least as good as the autologous therapies on the market. And, without that differentiator of being a company that can change the cost and accessibility paradigm in this particular space, sometimes just as good as isn't good enough, but that's giant in this space, isn't it? I mean, it's just a big deal.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, today we think, a very small subset of patients who could be receiving CAR-Ts are actually getting them, you hear different projections anywhere from 5 to maybe 15%. But that's just in kind of very late line setting, kind of, heavily pretreated patients. They've already seen lots of different lines of therapies. We now know that CAR-Ts have tremendous benefit, if used really early in disease. We've got, survival data from some of the on-market products, that are really demonstrating this. But we're having trouble meeting, manufacturing enough to meet the patient need, even for the smaller patient populations in late line disease. Well, now when we clearly see that they could benefit so many patients in early line disease, there's just no way to bridge that math. You have to have production at scale that's, going to make enough product to serve the needs of these patients. And that's just in oncology. We're all now also really very excited about the potential opportunity for cell therapy to treat various autoimmune diseases, which is another area that I'm very passionate about. Kind of come from an autoimmune disease, family. So it's, some of those diseases are terrible, and the therapies are also terrible. So to have a CAR-T kind of one and done approach for patients with those diseases is also incredibly exciting. Well, let me tell you, the patient populations in those diseases dwarf the patient populations in oncology. And some of these products are the same products that you would use. So if we can't meet patient need today for small patient populations in oncology, what are we going to do when we have data that shows that patients could be benefiting for these much larger patient populations? So that's why we, say the future really is allo. It has to be allo, but the burden is on us as an industry and on Poseida to show that the right kind of allogeneic CAR-T can absolutely do that.
Yeah. Well, you've certainly got the energy and the passion and obviously some great science to move that ball downfield. And you're a fantastic advocate for it. So I wish you luck. I thank you so much for coming on the show with me and entertaining my meandering and rambling questions.
Oh, thank you so much, Matt. It's been my absolute pleasure. Yeah, thanks so much.
I hope we can do it again soon. Maybe after the data readouts later in the year.
Absolutely.
Maybe top half of 25, we'll get back together and talk about some of that data.
That would be great.
All right. So that's Poseida CEO, Dr. Kristin Yarema. I'm Matt Pillar, and you just listened to The Business of Biotech. We're produced by Life Science Connect and its community of learning, solving, and sourcing resources for all manner of life sciences professionals. I invite you to subscribe to the Business of Biotech podcast anywhere you like to listen. Leave us feedback and a review, and be sure to subscribe to our monthly newsletter at bioprocessonline.com/BOB. In the meantime, thanks for listening.